It's my privilege to introduce our plenary speaker for the week, Dr. Nik Ripkin. He and his wife Ruth are veterans from the mission field, serving with the International Mission Board, IBM, for over 30 years in places such as Malawi, Transkei, South Africa, Kenya, Somalia, Germany, Ethiopia, and the Middle East. He's also the founder of Nik Ripkin Ministries, which serves to expand the kingdom of God by sharing truths and practices learned from believers who have suffered persecution. He has a BA in Religion and History from Georgetown College, an MDiv and a DMin from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's the author of many articles on missions, and along with his wife has done extensive research among the persecuted people, especially in 70 different countries. He's the author of a popular book called The Insanity of God, A True Story of Faith, Resurrected, The Insanity of Obedience, and Walking with Jesus in Tough Places. They're the parents of 3 sons. They reside in Richmond, Virginia. It's a privilege to have you, Dr. Ripken, and your wife Ruth with us this week. Would you join me in welcoming them to our WEC conference?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. Morning still. The time zone we just came from, it's tomorrow. So, look with me if you've got your Bibles in Luke chapter 24, the last book of Luke. And we're going to assume a couple things. One, that you love the Bible, either that you love the Bible and you know the story, or that you don't know the Bible and therefore you don't love the stories. But either way, I just want to tell the story to you as you're looking at it, and you can fill in the parts that I leave out. And this will be much like we would do it. And, you know, out of the 2.8 billion people on the planet that do not know Christ, that don't have a verse, not, as we were saying last night, they don't have a verse of the Bible in their language. They have not a song about heaven, about God in their language. They have no one like you to come and tell them the truth. And 83% of them cannot read or write a word. If I probably had to pick out one of the top 3 challenges in modern missions, is that we are equipping you with just literate tools to be pastors and teachers. We're not equipping you to go into the marketplaces of life. And I'm talking about as fathers of sons. I'm talking about local churches. I'm talking about understanding that the Bible is equally the Word of God in its content and its context, and that Jesus filled his heart, his life, his mind so with the Word of God that when he went to the marketplace, he didn't have to take a note with him. He did not have to take a written word of a scroll with him in those days, and he could reproduce the Old Testament by memory and tell the stories of God. When we say that 83% of those without Christ are oral communicators, are not literate, we're not saying they're a bunch of dummies. Folks, oral peoples have to hear something one time to own it. Literate people have to hear it 7 times. So let's act as if we're a brilliant oral communicator. And in the last chapter of the book of Luke, what you've got is probably 99% of everyone that had ever rubbed up against Jesus, that followed him, that had some concept in their mind that he was a Messiah, and therefore the Messiah had a physical reign on this earth. And at the point when you leave chapter 23 and go to chapter 4, they are so focused on the crucifixion, they cannot recognize the resurrection when it just stares them right into the face. And some women go to the tomb and they find it empty. And in another version of God's word, when it tells the story that they go up to someone they assume is the gardener, and they basically say to him, "Isn't it enough that you have killed him, crucified him, and now, even in his death, you continue doing what you did, and it's not enough that you killed him, but you had to steal his body also. Folks, we went from 1988 to 2013 in Somalia. Out of every believer that was killed and the couple that died of natural causes, none of them. We had not one time in 25 years did we have their body at their own funeral because fundamentalists killed them and immediately threw their bodies in latrines, threw it in the oceans where the sharks feed, threw it in these burning, smelly, horrible garbage heaps. And for 25 years, every Somali that gave his life for Christ, they so dishonored them that we didn't even have their body for their own funeral. And here are some women going to the tomb, and they discover that which they had been told for the last 3 years was going to happen, that he wasn't going to be dead, that he was going to be resurrected. And they went back and told the men, and guys, here's a real testimony that we haven't changed for 2,000 years. That unless we see it and touch it and hear it for ourselves, it's not true. And the women went back and told them about the crucifixion. And when they went and checked for themselves, finding no body there, and it said they sort of treated the women's words as nonsense. And then right in the middle of the resurrection story, you have another event unfolding that when I first read it as an 18-year-old guy in my dorm room, probably less than a month after I'd become a Christian in a factory where I was working at nights, I read this story. And it talks about two men who are going from Jerusalem on that Emmaus road. And here they're talking as they are walking, and Jesus appears in their midst. And the Bible, the biblical writer, Luke, is so, well, he's like Ruth, not like me, because it says they were kept from recognizing him. That's just a pastor's daughter way of saying that they did not have all their mental faculties in place. And by the way, Ruth and I are both PKs. She's a pastor's kid, and I'm a pagan's kid. And that gives us all the spiritual gifts we need. I have this insatiable hunger to find people who don't know Christ, because I was 18 years of age. No one had ever shared Christ with me, not in the buckle, the Bible Belt. My family was a family that I physically have watched growing up. My family walking a street of our 1,200 county seat town, and watch Christian people cross the road, church people cross the road, in order not to engage my family unless we changed what we were smoking and drinking and the drugs we were putting in our bodies. If we changed who we were sleeping with, the languages that we used, the words, the curse words that we used, unless we cleaned up and met the church at maybe a 4-foot by 3-foot altar, we absolutely had no access to the kingdom of God. Not through the body of Christ. And here's these two men. They're walking on that road, and it says Jesus appears, but they were kept from recognizing him. And he asked them, do you understand? What are you talking about? And they said, are you the only one in Jerusalem that doesn't know what's happened? And he says, and he asked them what they were talking about. And they said, about Jesus of Nazareth, a man filled with such mighty deeds and power, but our Jewish leadership gave him over. And here he's been crucified and dead for 3 days, and you have one of these most filled with emotion sentences in all the Bible. They said, but we had hoped that he would be the redemption, would redeem Israel. What do you do when hope dies? What do you do when everything is crucifixion and there's not even a resurrection on the horizon? There's not even a whisper of it. what do you do when everything's crucifixion, like it was for these guys? And then Luke catches up with my personality and less with Ruth's personality, because he says, "Oh, you bunch of foolish guys." You know, I like straight talking, and he takes them and says, "Did you not know that the Son of Man had to suffer and die?" And he takes them from Moses throughout the prophets and just retold them what they'd heard from the day that they were born, and heard it through the ministry of life of Jesus. And they come at the end of that day, and the two men stop to fix the meal, and it looks like Jesus is going on, and they beg him to stay with him. But the point I want you to make, the longer that you're in Christianity, the more you think these stories make sense. You'll read it as, "Oh yeah, no, it's this." How can they walk and be around and observe and hear and touch and taste the food that he broke and he distributed? How could they not recognize Jesus? How can they be that foolish? You know, since 25 years ago, when we left to go overseas, you could use words like STUBID. I'm not going to do that because there's small children here. And their parents have told them that's not a nice word. So we've come back to America and we're having to relearn English. But there was a time when our whole world was crucified. There was 150 converts from Islam in Somalia. When we went there in the height of the Civil War and famine, they killed 4 of my best friends on one day. They knew where they worked. They stalked them. They followed them. And they planned this out to the second. And from 7 o'clock one morning to 7:45, they walked up to 4 of my best friends, put a gun to the back of their head, blew their brains out, and then threw their bodies away. That's crucifixion. When we went to Somalia, there were 150 believers. When we were kicked out, only 4 were left alive. That's crucifixion. And you can seemingly spiritually turn over every rock and stone and look in every nook and cranny, searching for the resurrection, and you can't find it. And we're burying 20 people a day. Now, we're there, and I know how rough this culture is on women. But we were in a place where it was 6 months before Ruth and I ever met a lady that hadn't been raped at least 8 times. It just was a part. They no longer, they got to the point where all that trauma was hidden so far down, it just became a part of their daily dialogue about who was going to do what to whom when they had to go get water. And they only 4 places they could get water in a place that now has 1 million people. And we're feeding 50,000 people a day. We're working with people that are traumatized. We're resettling refugees. And I promise you, not a day went by when I did not ask of myself, what Sunday school class did I miss? What sermon did I not listen to? Or what course did I fail to take at my Baptist college or in my master's or my doctorate? How can I get to Somalia? And I understood. If there was ever a good vision statement written, it was in Matthew 2 by Jesus when he said, I've come to seek and save those who are lost. And he said, I'm going to accomplish that by sending you as sheep among wolves. Well, everything I had prepared me to be a sheep among the sheep. And so when I got to where the wolves were in the majority, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. Everything's a cross, and there's no empty tomb. not in regard to a resurrection. And there were 8 of us. They had told us what we were doing couldn't be done. And we left South Africa and went to Kenya. And they said, listen, come on, learn language, start getting your feet wet a little bit with refugees in Kenya. It'll take you 3 to 5 years for the door to be open into Somalia. Guess what? The door's always closed until you're right ready to walk through it. Why would God keep a door open for 3 to 5 years waiting for us to become obedient? And within 3 months, started in December, February, first trip in Somalia. 6 months after that, we're feeding 50,000 people a day. We've got about 6 nurses on a team of 8. We're doing mobile medical clinics. We're burying 20 children a day. We're sitting with thousands of hours listening to people who are traumatized by. We can tell you what it looks like to be in places where you and I and our ancestors have been disobedient for over 2,000 years and not taking Christ to these places. We've been where pagans have a PhD in paganism. And you know what? Evil has no bottom. I'd come out and be with Ruth and the boys, and I'd say, wow, these Somalis have redefined what bottom looks like. And the next trip, Ruth, well, I was wrong before. They've redefined what bottom looks like. Find that evil has no bottom. And what I want you to see is just 8 of us. And my wife is raising our 3 boys as I come and go for 2 to 6 weeks at a time. And at times I stay with the boys in Kenya and she goes in. And the boys would always say, the boys and I agree about one thing. They'd say, Daddy, you know, it's a lot better when Mama stays home and you go. They knew which parent they wanted to live through that mess, and the thing is, I didn't disagree with them. That's my vote also, but you know what? Our responsibility was to embrace Somalis anywhere in the world they were at that time, and while the United Nations had decided that the efforts would be really focused in Mogadishu, and that's where we can get funded, and that's where we can actually get plane rides in. We're still responsible, at least in our minds and our hearts, for Somalis globally. And I began to have a dream as we studied and learned more about them. And I heard as clearly as I'm hearing my own voice now, God saying to me, I need you to go to Ethiopia. I need you to go to the Somali part of Ethiopia, and no amount of entreaty on my part. Why do you want me to do this? Or how am I going to get there? Or what do you want me to do when I get there? It was just, listen, be obedient, and go to Ethiopia. And I ignored that in my dreaming hours. And I began to hear the voice of God as I was waking. I need you in Ethiopia. I need you in Ethiopia. No response on why or how or whatever. But finally, I gathered that team of 8 together and I told them what was going on in my heart. And they say, well, let's get this right. You brought us here. You're the team leader. We're feeding 50,000 people a day. We're doing the mobile medical clinics. We're burying this many. We're doing this traumatized stuff. And they just listed everything that I've shared with you, plus 10 or 15 more things. And you're going to leave us, Mr. Leader, and go to a place where nobody's asked you to come. You just eating something that's not agreeing with you at night, and you think it's the voice of God. It's probably indigestion. And you're going to leave us here and leave us in a war zone, leave us in a famine zone, and you're going to go somewhere for a month or 2, and you're going to leave us here with no leadership and no support because of something you're hearing. You think that it's God speaking to you. And I said, yeah, that's about the way it is. And they called me that stupid word or something worse. And so I just stayed there. because they were my responsibility. And after about 2 more weeks, I went out to Nairobi and I did what I do. And we share everything that Daddy or Mama has been doing the times that we've been apart, to where our boys can tell you our stories as if you can't convince them they weren't there. But from midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning, I would tell Ruth things that sometimes I was afraid to tell God. And this night I was manipulating my wife, and I'm sure there's not another husband on earth that's ever done this, but I was reminding her with our faces just inches apart in the middle of night, and sharing with her all the things that I'm doing and all the things I'm responsible for. And I'm having a little bit of a pity party, and what I'm doing is I'm setting Ruth up, because I after an hour of telling her all the things that we're doing and all the things that the lives that are in my hands, and I tell her about my dreams in the daytime and in the nighttime, and the voice of God I'm hearing in the daytime, and how I told this to our team, and our team told me I had to stay. I couldn't leave them there, and so I stayed there. And what I fully expected, this pastor's daughter, this tender-hearted, gentle creature, to look at her husband and say, "Oh, honey, you're doing more than 10 men can do, and your plate is so big, and we keep giving you a bigger plate, and there's just no more of this you can do. Honey, just do what you're doing, and no one can criticize you for not doing more than any human on earth can do." That's what she was supposed to say to me. But she somehow didn't get the memo. And this sweet woman, for the first time I know of in our marriage, looked at me and whispered, "Nick, it sounds like you've been disobedient. You better get obedient." Well, there's a clear word. So the next morning, I start getting ready to go to Ethiopia. Now, how can I not listen to the Holy Spirit? But I listen. Well, just let me know if it's different in your marriage, okay? Listen, just let me know, all right? And I'll send you to a counselor because you're a pathological. I didn't say that. This is not a dialogue, okay? Don't go there. And so this is coming out of the communist years. You just don't go to a travel agent and say, "I want to go to Ethiopia." And it takes 14 signatures to go from the highlands of Addis Ababa down to Region 5, the desert region. It's called the Ogaden Desert region of Ethiopia, home to 1.5 to 2 million Somalis. And God has such a wonderful sense of humor that when I finally, after my wife just did multiple miracles to get me into Ethiopia, the second day I'm there, there is one Westerner working for the Ethiopian government as part of the cabinet, and it's a guy from the Assemblies of God, a charismatic guy that got me all 14 signatures in one day. God bless the Assemblies of God. And they won't let me talk to them when I'm back in Kentucky. By the way, you've already been exposed this morning to Hebrew and Spanish, and now, if you haven't recognized, you're getting exposure to another major language people. It's called rednecks, okay? So if you're having trouble with my English, I can't help it. I can't help you, you know. And so... And not only did God give me this Assemblies of God guy, he says, "Nick, I've been wanting to go down there so much, I'm going to go with you." Well, praise God. And he says, not only that, I've got 3 French doctors from Médecins Sans Frontières that's going to go with us. And so all 5 of us fly down there. Now, Somalia was a mess, but it had 32,000 troops there trying to stabilize the 90% of of people dying of starvation, and they did reduce that to about 9%. But you know all the stories that, or you should, that go along with that. There are 77 relief agencies in Mogadishu alone that followed that $4 billion that was being dumped in Mogadishu and the surrounding area. And the Ogaden, as far as relief agencies, now they have 5. Me and the charismatic guy and the 3 lost French guys. And those French guys are looking at these little clinics in and around that little town called Godet. And this guy who's with disaster relief for the Ethiopian government, you know what he did? They had 5 warehouses that is about the size of this room, except maybe 20, 30 feet high, and it was filled with medicines and water and tents and blankets and everything you needed for life. And they had absolutely no distribution system until a Kentucky redneck showed up, and he now is responsible for distributing all this stuff to 1.5 to 2 million people. And they'd send me out south of the town, and I'd go out about a 30-minute to an hour drive at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and everybody in that village, their mouth is green because all they have to eat is the leaves on the trees and the grass on the ground, because the rains have come, but they've eaten their seed and they have nothing to plant. It's back there in that warehouse. And I come back into town by 2 o'clock, 3 at the latest. You have to come back in because you're losing 15, 20 pounds a day through dehydration in that desert, no matter how much you drink. And I'd come back to this stick restaurant, and I'd meet with those 3 doctors and with this Assemblies of God guy. And you folks, you know what we were doing? And this is not supposed to happen. Jesus fixed this in Matthew 28 over 2,000 years ago when he commanded, not suggested, when he commanded us to go into all of the world, and now we're sitting in the midst of disobedience. And it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, crucifixion. And so we're sitting around this table, and we're all giving reports. You know what we do every day? We sit around that table and talk about where we're going the next day, and we're making decisions on who gets to live and who gets to die. And that becomes a cancer in your soul really quick. If you like making those decisions, you need the best psychiatrist that God has to offer, the best counseling he has to offer. Next day, I'd go out east of this little one-horse town and find people with water-filled blisters between their fingers and their toes, on their eyelids, on their ears, and they're sitting and they're standing and they're laying so rigid with pain, and just begging Allah to let them die, because they just know that whatever comes after this can't be worse than what they're living right now. I'd go back and report that, and the next day they'd send me out west, and we're looking at people. There's so much cholera and so much typhoid, and one of my guards come up, and he's from another clan. And by the way, I love what you're doing here, because the number one hindrance to the kingdom of God anywhere in the world is racism. Amen. And this is one of the few places I've ever been in the 3 years that we've been home because of medical issues. This is the most prolifically diverse group that we've been in those 3 years. Thank you. Thank you very much. Don't keep it here. Export it. Export it. And one of my guards came up to me, and Abdi is laughing. And I said, why are you laughing? He said, Dr. Nik, it's funny. I said, what's funny? He said, I've been looking at my watch. And he says, every 11 minutes somebody dies in this village. Isn't that funny? I said, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, I wanted to take him and shake him, and then, you know, you're wanting to become, it's so much easier to be part of, folks, it's so much easier to be part of the crucifixion than it is the resurrection. Because one's normal and the other's supernatural. And so I'm just crying out to God in the hut that I'm staying in, why am I here? What in the world's difference can 1,000 of me make? Why am I away from my wife and my boys and our boys, and why have I left the team hanging out to dry in Mogadishu? They're eating leaves for goodness sake, and they're dying 11 minutes. Somebody dies every 11 minutes. Their mouth is stained. They're just dying, and God, there's nothing that can be done here. And I'm sitting in that restaurant after a month of this nonsense, and it's open on all sides, and all of a sudden I see this 6'3", tallest Somali I'd ever met. He wasn't this big. He's just, thin, starved like the wrath of God, and his wraparound mawis that men wear with a knife in the front. He has it on in his dirty T-shirt. It's all he has to his name. And it's just odd because he was so focused, and he's not looking for something to drink or to eat. And he's staring at our table, and he walks, and I see him about 25 yards as he comes in, and he walks, and it gets really weird when he's just staring at me, and he walks up, and he stands above the table as I'm trying to eat whatever was the portion that day, and he's hostile in his body language, and he's all tensed up, and he's filthy, and he's starving, and he looks at me, and you just can't eat when a starving person's staring you in the heart. And I asked him finally, is there something wrong? Is there something I can do for you? Why are you staring at me like this? What do you want? And he just asked the strangest question. He said, are you the one? Have you come? And he turns and walks out of the restaurant. And my French friends and this AOG buddy, they said, who was that, Nick? I said, I don't know. It's obvious his elevator goes up, but his doors don't open. So he's just got an issue. But in the next 45 minutes, no more than an hour, from different parts of the desert, 4 more guys come in, separate from each other, and they come right to that table, one out of probably 75 under this tent, under this plastic, and they stand there with their arms crossed, staring at me, and until I asked them, what's wrong? What do you want? And increasingly, I'm getting upset, and I'm getting a little bit afraid. And each one of them separately asked me, are you the one? Have you come? And my friends are going nuts. They said, you told us you've never been here before. I said, I've never been here before. You told us you didn't know anybody. I said, I don't know anybody. You said that you've never done a project. I said, let me make this clear for you. I don't know anybody here. I've never been here. I didn't want to come here. God made me come here. And the 3 French guys like, okay, we got a psychotic on our hands, And I said, I'm here this time because it's God's fault. And if I get out of here, and if I ever come back, it'll be my fault, and I will never come back. I don't know what's wrong with these guys, but there just must be some kind of illness going around, and there's just some kind of mass hysteria, and I don't know, but I'm really very concerned. Now, but part of coming through Nairobi was Ruth and I have learned some things over the years. You don't go to a place like she was sending me and God was sending me without having prayer support that is just, we wouldn't go in a place like that with less than 150 people praying for us and fasting for us the whole time. And we had spent about 2 weeks gathering in the broader body of Christ in Nairobi, dear friends that would do that for us. And I went and saw one of my friends named Michael, and he said, tell me again what you're doing. And I told him. He said, Nick, you've done some dumb things over that I've known you over the years, but this really takes the cake. But while he's doing that, he pulls out a 3x5 card, and he writes something on it, and I look at it, and he's put some names on it. And I said, Michael, what's this? He said, well, this is the name of 5 families that years ago when we were in Somalia back in the late 70s and 80s, these are 5 families that gave their lives to Christ. But then the Civil War came and we Westerners had to flee and they had to run away from the western side of Somalia, and they disappeared somewhere in that desert region of Ethiopia. And for 5 years, we haven't heard from them. We don't know if they're alive. We don't know if they're dead. But every day we pray for them. We never cease loving them. And he said, I want you to take this card and carry it with you down in that desert and just pray over these names. And maybe by physical proximity, God will do something. I said, Michael, that sounds like voodoo Christianity to me. He said, is it any more worse than what you're doing? I said, give me your card. And I walked out of his office, and this was on a Tuesday. Of all this nonsense, are you the one, have you come? And on Friday, I make the worst security mistake that you ever make in a place like this. You never go anywhere by yourself. And you never go anywhere without telling people of authority where you are. But I'm going to leave the Amharic speaking side of this small town and cross this dry riverbed and go on the Somali side of town, because our youngest son had asked me to get him a Somali knife, and I could hear where they're clanging on the metal, and I know where that is a signal of where the goat hide bellows are, and with very ancient tools they're making knives, and they're making plows, and they're making all kinds of metal equipment. And so I cross that riverbed, and you enter this maze of houses, and you walk 5 yards this way, and then you have to walk 10 yards this way, and then you have to go 3 this way, and then 20 this way. And I'm listening and trying to see where I'm supposed to go. And I turn a corner, and I come up against the wall of one of the mud houses, and it's just a dead end. So I'm just going to turn around and go back up this little mud street that's about this wide. And as I got here, there's a crossroads here, and as I walked right here, 5 of the meanest Somali men, fundamentalists look like to me, walked out of the alleyway and blocked the whole way I was going. And so what do? Well, I just thought I'd do the redneck thing, and I flexed both of my muscles, and I walked up to them, and I put my hands on their shoulder just so I could walk through them. They put their hands on my chest, and they pushed me against the wall. And I promise you, if you ever grew up in the South, you'll remember there's an old hymn we used to sing, "Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before." I wasn't singing that song. This was not a good day. And my heart's thumping out of my chest, and I asked them, what's wrong? What do you want? And they said, we want to know. Are you the one? Have you come? And I go, oh my, I think it's the 5 crazy guys from the restaurant. And I said, but I didn't say that, but I thought it. And I said, well, what do you want from me, and why are you following me? And they said, we've got to tell you our story. And I said, can I leave? They said, no. I said, tell me your story. I'm all ears. And we stood there for over 3 hours. Felt like 3 months. They said, you may not know this, but we're Somali. Well, there's brain surgery. 100% of the people on that side of town are Somalis. And they said, but what? And they told me, they said, but you may not know, but we're from Somalia. And years ago, people that were your color of skin and that talked like you and acted like you came to our villages, and they told us about this man named Jesus. And we fell in love with those stories, and we believed in that man. And then the Civil War came, and we had to flee, and the big tall Somali had been shot in the face 5 times, and just a mass of scars. And another one had lost his baby crossing the border, been shot out of his arms. Another one had his wife starve on the journey, and you know, it was normal stories. And they just told me all of that. And they said, now we've been in this desert for 5 years, and we've not been closer than 500 kilometers to each other. For 5 years, we've never talked to another believer in Christ. For 5 years, we've been lonely, we've been scattered, we've been afraid, 500 kilometers apart. And they said all 5 of us began to pray the same prayer in the same period of weeks. And the prayer had 2 parts in it. Jesus, are you whom we were told you were back in our country, in our villages? Or are you some kind of fable, some kind of story that children are told? And Jesus, if you are whom we were told you are, does anybody care? Does anybody care whether we're alive or whether we're dead? We haven't met another one of you for 5 years. And is Jesus whom we were told he was? And if he is there another Christian on earth that cares even enough to even think about us? And I'm so scared, and my heart's beating so hard, and the sweat's pouring off of me, and I don't remember reaching in my soaking T-shirt pocket and pulling out a card with these names on it and reading Abdulaziz, Muhammad. I just read it to them. Abdulaziz, Muhammad, Mahmoud, Liban, and Suleiman. And as I read these names, these 5 sunburnt sons of the desert, they jumped away from me in terror. And they said, "Where did you get our names?" I said, "I got to tell you my story." And I told them about being saved in that cheese factory. I told them about meeting Ruth, about almost dying of malaria in Malawi and going to South Africa, and God telling us, God demanding of us to move to Kenya, and being in Mogadishu and all the stuff we're doing there, and being troubled by the dreams and by God's voice, and being disobedient, having my wife tell me that I need to get obedient, and how I didn't know what I've been doing here for all these months. And I just told them my story. And when I finished, they said, "You're the one. You're the one that God promised us," because they said, "We've been here for over 3 weeks, and we've been following every Westerner that gets out of the relief airplanes or out of the trucks." And they said, "The last 2 weeks we've been following you." Well, that's encouraging. and they said, we've never met someone like you that talks to our people in their own language. We've never met anybody that would risk their life to bring our people food and medicine. And we've never, ever seen a single person the color of your skin to hold our babies as they die, and then to tenderly wrap them in white cloth and help us bury them. And we've been following you for the last 2 weeks. Now answer our prayers. And on your behalf, on behalf of those who sent us out 35 years ago, we stood in that dusty, windswept alleyway and looked those 5 brothers in the eye and say, "You haven't believed in a fairy tale. Jesus is Lord of Lords, and he is King of Kings. And he died, and he was resurrected, and he's sitting on the right hand of God, on the throne of God. And he reigns, and he's coming again." And you want to know where I got these names? That when I passed through Nairobi, Somali believers who have escaped Somalia, and the workers who actually brought God to your villages, they gave me these names. And they said to me that they have never ceased loving you. They've never ceased praying you. And they begged me to take your names down here so that proximity that God could do something, and God has. You haven't believed a fairy tale, and you're prayed for, and you're loved. And these 5 brothers turned around and they said to me, "That's all we wanted to know." And they walked back into the desert. About a month later, I'm home. We get as many of those 150 prayer warriors, and my wife fixes a big meal, and I'm telling them everything chronologically that happened the last 2 months in there, and I'm telling the story, and Ruth begins to cry, which is not. Sometimes she cries because it's Tuesday. You know, it's just her. She'll tell you it's her spiritual gift, but it is. But my boys don't cry, and there they are crying. I'm going, whoa. And then I look around, and there's not anybody but me that's not crying. And I said, well, what's wrong with you people? Why are you crying? They said, you don't see? I said, see what? You really don't see. You don't see how God made you in your mother's womb, and how God spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of man hours, women hours, so to put you with Ruth, to put you here, to move you here, to get the pieces that you needed, so that when God spoke in Mogadishu, I actually had filters through which to understand that was His voice and not indigestion. They said, you don't see how God has walked with you every day in that desert by your side, and you don't see how God has not disrupted, but organized your whole world. So just these 5 suffering children of God and their families could be found, and told them that they're loved and that the crucifixion is not their heritage. Resurrection's their heritage. And I wept like a baby. And in my heart and my mind, I apologized to these 2 foolish guys in Luke 24. And it says, as Jesus looked as if he was going on, they begged him to stop. And when he took the bread, as he had for the past 3 years, and he blessed it and he broke it, that their eyes were open and they beheld the Lord. We're here not just because you invite us. God sent us here to say to you, to ask you, as we start this week together, are you the one? Have you come? Almost every one of you ladies know of, either here or back home, of a young lady who's made a bad decision, and she's used her body in a way that she shouldn't have allowed it to be used, and now she's looking at making a worse decision. And she probably went to bed last night wondering, do I have any other option other than saving my life and my future? I'm going to have to kill my baby. And she wants to know, are you the one, ladies? Are you going to come? Are you going to look her up? Are you not going to walk by her and change the side of the street you're walking on? And are you going to go to her and say, in Jesus' name, there's a better way than the crucifixion? Almost every one of you, and it might be yours like it was mine, that your mom and your dad has decided enough's enough. We're tired of fighting. And they're ready to give up and call it quits. And what that's going to do to your young brothers and sisters. And what if you're the one that God has raised up to humble yourselves in front of your parents, perhaps on your knees, and tell them there is a better way, and His name is Jesus. And the streets of this city is filled with people who believe that Washington can solve their problems, that governors and mayors can solve their problems, when there is not. And if Jesus is not the answer, there is no answer. But I'm asking you, will you open your hearts and your minds? Will you open the Word of God? Will you pray, and will you look for that situation where the broken, scattered, abused, mistreated, sinful men and women that you walk by every day? I'm asking you, are you the one? Are you willing for God to pick you up from an air-conditioned room on a campus in which God is honored? Are you willing to allow God to put you on any frozen mountaintop or any basement of the desert that is boiling hot? Are you willing to be the one in the famines and the civil wars? Are you willing to do that in the cities and the villages and the streets of this world? Are you the one? Have you come? If you are a follower of Jesus, you are that for somebody today. And it's in God's job description. He can pick you up, and He can move you, and He can spend whatever amount of money He wants to. And you can say to God, but God, I've got kids. Bring them with you. God, I've got elderly parents. I'll take care of them. God, I haven't finished this. I haven't got this. What about my future? What about my bank account? What about, no, God, what I want to do, I want to disciple Christians so I don't have to hang out with lost people. Are you the one that in my heart of hearts I know that if you don't go, they don't get towed? If you don't love, they don't get loved. If you don't heal, they don't get healed. If you don't gather them in your arms, there's not another hug out there for them. Are you the one? Are you the one that will be recognized as an answer to the desperate prayers that are being lifted up within walking distance, if not inside of this campus? Let's pray. Father, for me, it is so good to hear the quiet voice of a baby crying, knowing that it's not because it's been left in the desert to die, or it's so sick that it's dehydrated and starved. Lord, it's so great to be among people within whom you have trusted the very kingdom of God, that they will not keep it to themselves. And Father, it's my prayer, move us, Lord. Move us to another part of the city. Let us walk down this street instead of the street we usually walk down. But Father, move heaven and earth so that we can be your answer. Or we can be your answer through our body, through our flesh. Father, may it be written where our ashes are scattered, or our bones are buried. He, she were the ones, and they went where God commanded them to go. Hear our prayer, O Lord. Incline your ears to us, and may you be glorified in our flesh and our deeds. In Jesus' name, amen.